Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is an in-depth breakdown of every detail you missed and Star Wars Easter egg in The Acolyte Episode 8, the season finale, an episode titled The Acolyte. I covered some of the big questions from this series in yesterday's Ending Explained video, but now let's relive this finale, scene by scene, for all the great attention to detail that was easy to miss. And the mystery of Kymir's Cortosis helmet goes on, which means I'll always be rocking this Peace is a Lie shirt. And you can get one of these over at nerdriot.shop and support New Rockstars directly. Okay, the alternating red and blue lightsaber glows reflecting on the heads in the Star Wars title fanfare is now echoed by Osha later bleeding her anger into a Kyber crystal, turning the blade from blue to red. It's the first time in live action we have seen the bleeding of a Kyber crystal, and it's a warning of how vulnerable we are to our anger refusing to clot and staining our souls. Over the Lucasfilm logo, we hear this. Osha's deep breathing under the Cortosis helmet, the same breathing over black that we ended episode 6 with. So this episode begins in a peaceful sensory deprivation meditation, but that peace is a lie.
Osha.
Her body contorts into the same stiff pose that she's in when she force chokes Soul. This whole cave turns dark blue, and we alternate from the inner headspace to the outer reality, and in that reality, Kymir's eyes are fully black and his face loosens. While in the inner headspace, he consciously fights that pain and struggles to free Osha from this grasp. So for his eyes to be black like this, Osha must be exerting upon Qimir some Brendok thread witchcraft that she inherited from her mother, Anastasia, drawing him in the same way Anastasia possessed Torben in episode 7, which is interesting because Osha struggled with those thread abilities as a girl. It was Mae who was the more adept of the two. So what changed? Was it the Cortosis? Was it just the proximity to Qimir? Or was it something else? Because if you listen closely, while at first it sounds like Manny Jacinto is just sucking in air, there's definitely a subtle whisper coming from somewhere. Ooh, what is this whisper? Could it be Plagueis from elsewhere in these caves, whispering in the Sith language of Urkatat, like the voice of Sauron whispering the black speech through the One Ring? Ashnask Terpatluk. Soul removes the helmet, and if you look closely on the moment of that removal, you can see red lightsaber glows reflected in Osha's eyes, foreshadowing her own eventual turn later this episode. I think that is what she really saw, or the destiny she chose for herself to wash away what she saw. Because Osha says that she saw Mae with her hand outstretched, killing Soul, and that Mae had a saber in her hand, but she did not use it. But Osha, I think, is really seeing a future version of herself doing this by the end of it. I don't think it's confusion or even deception on Osha's part, deception toward Qimir or back at herself, but really it's a question of destiny versus choice. Osha initially saw the fate she described to Qimir for her sister to kill Soul, but Osha decides to change that fate, to take her sister's place, to spare her sister the pain of a path to the dark side.
This is the future you saw. She can kill with no weapon.
But the future isn't fixed.
This was the most important lesson that her mother Anastasia imparted to her. The transition to become the Acolyte of this episode's title and of the series title is a choice by Osha. Soul has taken Mae to Brendok, hoping to use the fact that both Mae and Osha are alive to prove there is a vengeance on Brendok, and Soul is continuing to defend his actions.
It was right for us to intervene. You and Osha are not twins. You're not even sisters. You're...
It's interesting that Soul was cut off as he was about to reveal the very specific thing Mae and Osha are, like perhaps a dyad in the Force. But later on in this episode, he just suggests that they were one person to split into two, and beyond that, he has no idea how they were created. So if Soul is actually really uncertain about what they are, why is he so certain that he did the right thing? Now, Pip, reprogrammed to help Mae in episode 6, switches from lockpicking mode to taser mode real fast. But that's okay, because we realize we're actually now watching a redemptive hero in Mae, and we want Pip to help her. The swapping light and dark clothes back in episode 5 was initially Mae's deception, but by this episode, both sisters have embraced their new white hat, black hat wardrobe as a reflection of their true moral alignments. Mae hops into the escape ship.
See you in hell, Jedi.
Okay, now some people are griping that the concept of hell does not exist in Star Wars, but Han says the same thing in The Empire Strikes Back, so chill out.
Your tauntaun will freeze before you reach the first marker.
Then I'll see you in hell.
Really, I think Star Wars titles can totally afford to have more real-world idioms if it means giving their characters some texture. I mean, what do you want? Everybody in Star Wars to be as like dull and lifeless as all the dialogue in The Mandalorian and Ahsoka? Like, Star Wars characters are allowed to have characterization beyond fighting, piloting, and goofing around with adorable puppets and droids. Sol chases Mae through the rings of the blue moon orbiting Brendok, and it is jaw-droppingly gorgeous. The rings of rock and ice form two planes that Mae's ship is small enough to slip through, forcing Sol's larger dropship to crash through the upper and lower levels. And notice there are some little pillars of rock that connect the rings as light beams in through them, and the horizontal horizon line with the upper and lower blue textured surfaces whizzing out toward us reminds us both of hyperspace and the trench run, but rotated 90 degrees. And I just love that this ringed moon of Brendok that played such an important role in the Ascension in episode 3 and episode 7 and formed one of the layered O's of the Acolyte logo now gets to be an actual set piece like this in the finale. It's such good payoff. Basil the Tanan sees Sol using his targeting system, which sounds like a higher frequency tone version of Darth Vader's targeting system in the trench run. But Basil sabotages the controls, which is a bit confusing. I think Basil thinks that Sol is targeting Mae to shoot her down and doesn't want him to do that, when really all Sol seems to be doing is targeting Mae with like the tractor beam to reel her in. So on Coruscant, Ma Gadana tells Master Vernestra that Senator Rayencourt, whom she worried about with Senator Chewant in episode 6, is now here to see her.
You let him in the control room?
Harry Chevaldwin is so funny in this take. Like, he was so happy to report the arrival of David Harewood, who plays Martian Manhunter in the CW Supergirl series and Estes in Homeland, and now he's so awkward, he just gives off the expression of someone at the Qimir end of Vern's light whip. Why is it so bad that Senator Rayencourt was put in the control room? Well, this is the room where Vernestra later calls it mysterious Senate contact, so I think she's worried that Rayencourt is going to see the recent missed calls of all of her backroom dealing. Rayencourt says,
I was surprised when they said you were traveling through hyperspace. How was your stomach?
It's my head, actually.
So Vern's hyperspace issues were referenced in episode 6, and they're referenced to the High Republic novels. In Justina Ireland's Out of the Shadows, traveling through hyperspace causes Vernestra not to get like motion sickness, but rather to experience visions of being transported to another place or another time, and going through hyperspace allows her to commune with other Force users. In the novels, this is an ability she's grateful for. It actually helps her when they're battling the Nile, which is a pirate Viking fleet that's trying to take over the galaxy. Now, she sees it as a curse. I wonder if this hyperspace travel might have opened Vernestra up to corruption from the Sith. Like the whispers that we hear with Qimir and Osha at the beginning of the episode could be what Vernestra hears when she travels through hyperspace. Rayencourt does not hide his disdain.
I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power, posing as a religion. A delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable.
Rayencourt is basically stating the theme of this series, and I wonder if his name could be some Dickensian wordplay, like Ray and Court, like a ray of truthful light in the court of judgment upon the Jedi. Vern says that they don't control the Force, but he's not talking about the Force. He's talking about their emotions that are uncontrollable, and that's what's scariest. He says,
You project an image of goodness and restraint, but it's only a matter of time before one of you snaps. And when, not if that happens, who will be strong enough to stop him?
stop him. Yeah, like Mother Anastasia, this guy has a prophetic vision of exactly what Anakin Skywalker is going to do in Revenge of the Sith. Rayencourt explains why the rest of the Senate is blind to the Jedi.
When you're looking up to heroes, you don't have to face what's right in front of you.
It's a similar commentary that we're seeing in shows like The Boys. In worlds where some people have legit superpowers and wizardry, average folk worship them as gods who walk among them, and they end up letting go of the burdens of healthy social institutions that they actually really need to govern ourselves responsibly. And he leaves with this sass.
Good luck. Now, what is it you say? May the Force be with you.
Ha! Since Vernestra earlier said that she didn't control the Force, she really opened herself up to this verbal smackdown, because she's saying whether or not they're on the moral good side of the Force amounts to a roll of the dice. So Rayencourt's saying that that phrase is not a blessing as much as it's really a version of may the odds be ever in your favor. Back on the unknown planet, we see a family of Skura continuing to forage through the rocks while the baby now perches on its parents' back. Qimir and Osha cross the rock bridge to get to Qimir's ship. Now, a lot of these rocks look like carved blocks that were part of some structure previously, maybe a fortress on this planet to protect the Cortosis mine that was destroyed in a past war. Just for there to be masonry on a planet implied to be deserted and undiscovered means that there would need to have been some past civilization there. Qimir offers to train Osha.
Told you. I'm not my sister.
You're definitely not.
Yeah, and we are going to see exactly how unlike her sister Osha is. Summer's here, and that means it's time to get outdoors. You know, the place that's slightly less predictable than your couch. If you want to be ready for anything nature can throw your way, then you're gonna want a pair of Vessi Stormburst low tops. Vessi Stormbursts are perfect for everything from sidewalk puddles to mountain trails to morning drizzle. They're the sneakers I pack for weekends away. They're 100% waterproof, but also lightweight, so I can be ready to check out a tide pool, wade across the stream, or ambush unsuspecting friends with water balloons. It is hot out, they should thank me. Vessi Stormburst low tops are waterproof like boots, low-key like sneakers, and perfect for keeping dry, no matter what your day throws your way. They're stylish, comfortable, versatile, and if you click the link in the description below, yours for 15% off. Elevate your spontaneous activities with Vessi's Stormburst low top for versatility. Discover more at vessi.com/rockstars. Get your pair today to get an automatic 15% off your first purchase at checkout and be ready to stay cool and dry. So, as they depart, we get this massive moment. Ah! This figure in the shadows is Plagueis, a Immune Race, the Sith Lord, Insidious's predecessor, discussed by Palpatine in the Opera House in Revenge of the Sith.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Darth Plagueis, he could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life.
Palpatine goes on to say that Plagueis taught his apprentice everything he knew, and that apprentice killed him in his sleep. Actually, the deep male vocalizations that we hear in this moment with Plagueis in the cave are the same vocals that we heard in the Coruscant Opera House. Now it's murky, but Plagueis definitely squints as he watches them leave, perhaps out of anger or betrayal of his apprentice, Qimir, finding a new pupil to overthrow him? Or is it out of interest about what Osha is exactly? Is he disappointed to see them leave? There are a lot of possibilities here. I believe that Qimir does not know that Plagueis is on this island watching them, and that Plagueis is not yet the Master Sith, but he's still in his apprenticeship under Darth Tenebrous. This could be a period of history described in legend sources like James Luceno's 2008 Darth Plagueis book and Matthew Stover's 2011 short story The Tenebrous Way, which described Tenebrous and Plagueis going to the planet Baldemnik and finding Cortosis there, and it is there where Plagueis kills Tenebrous. Technically, Plagueis' age and the timeline of his Sith career have really changed from Luceno's novel for him to be alive here in this story, but the fact that he's Immune Race tells us that the novel is the inspiration, because the original concept art for the character of Plagueis suggested that he could be a Nemoidian. This planet on the Acolyte is not named, at least as of this taping, but it matches the descriptions of Baldemnik. This moment could be Plagueis' early steps in his search for a new apprentice that he could use to overthrow Tenebrous, and his discovery of Osha and her origin as a co-creation of a Virgins in the Force could be how he discovers how to influence midichlorians to create life. Now, of course, Plagueis' eventual apprentice will be Sidious, so that really leaves the fates of Qimir and Osha a mystery. They still could branch off into a splinter order that becomes the Knights of Ren. That did not get revealed or even addressed in this series. I gotta be honest, I'm not surprised, but I still love the theory. But various sources online have gone back to the Ascension scene in episode 3 and spotted these hooded figures on the side of the group, a face that we do not see under the hood, speculating that that could have been Plagueis or Qimir.
We were blessed with a miracle! The gift of life!
That could have been Plagueis observing this phenomena. And if that's true, that would also suggest Plagueis helped the witches find this power, and that these witches were okay with a male presence in their all-female cult during their most sacred ritual. And I think the Acolyte series is suggesting that it was Anastasia and Coral's discovery via the Virgins on Brendok, a Virgins that the Sith might have known about, either before or after, taking this power from these witches, or maybe using these witches as tests. So really the two possibilities are Plagueis has not yet met Qimir, or that Plagueis and Qimir are already working together. For what it's worth, we do edit with a circular wipe from Plagueis to the triangular-shaped mining facility on Brendok, constructed directly on top of the Virgins, suggesting that there might have been a connection between Plagueis and this location. And speaking of this mystery, Vernestra talks to a mystery voice over the comms.
I know he is, but I need to get a message to him. It's urgent.
This is highly unorthodox, but I shall see what I can do.
Okay, so first off, this comms device looks like the tubes that Han Solo speaks into down on the detention level in A New Hope, but I might be crazy, but this voice sounds like the voice of Ian McDiarmid, the actor who played Sheev Palpatine.
This is highly unorthodox, but I shall see what I can do.
Our clone intelligence units have discovered the location of General Grievous.
Now, I know it's crazy. Palpatine should not be born yet, let alone be an adult man in the Senate taking calls from the Jedi. McDiarmid, for what it's worth, is not credited in this episode, but I don't know. Maybe the creators of the show are so wildly changing the lifespans of characters to say that Palpatine could already be positioned in the Senate as like an aide or a secretary to Chancellor Drellick or some other political ally of Vernestra's in the Senate, as Vern is now trying to rally her numbers ahead of her tribunal. And as Sidious, he could already be in place as Plagueis' apprentice. And Plagueis is now seeing Qimir and Osha as a master who already has an apprentice, just interested only in learning how to create life via vergences and midichlorian manipulation. Osha shows Qimir the elevator panel, the only way in unless he wants to climb.
Are you sure?
So Qimir can teleport? I think Qimir might have used the same ability we saw Anastasia start to use and Coral use, where they become one with the Force and transform into black smoke or vapor to transport to a different location. But if like Qimir or anyone else could do this within a few seconds, it does make us wonder, why don't they do it all the time? What the hell is this Batman shit? Sol returns to the ledge where he allowed Mae to fall. What we hear there are the chants of the witches during the Ascension ceremony, and specifically the female voice we hear sounds a lot like Margarita Livieva as Mother Coral, and I just love her voice, specifically the way she snapped at Torben, "Not you!
Not you!
But notice how the chants go melodically up and in reverse to go down. Which nicely parallels Mae's fall from this broken bridge and her rise back up as she climbs up from the pit where she fell. Sol continues to wander the fortress screaming, "Mae!" which gets him discovered.
Thank you for leading me to her. We make a great team.
It's interesting that Sol is struggling to find Mae after this exchange with Qimir and Osha in episode 6.
He's found me before, and his strength in the Force is very powerful.
You think that's his strength? That's your strength in the Force, Osha.
It suggests that Mae is not as strong in the Force for Sol to be unable to find her. And Qimir taunts, "We make a great team," suggesting that they have both equally driven these young women toward the dark side. A hallway duel follows, where Qimir, as in episode 5, initially uses only one hand to wield his saber. The red and blue lights reflect on the Cortosis helmet, and it really does look like the opening Star Wars fanfare at the beginning of every episode. Sol leaps off the walkway and Qimir follows, both of them refusing to break eye contact as they gracefully float down, wirework inspired by Ang Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Qimir splits his hilt into a second blade, similar to Ahsoka using one sword as a katana and a shorter blade as a wakizashi, but Sol is ready for him this time, holding one arm out while positioning his blue saber back to burn Chimir's hand and using that pain to knock free one of the sabers, all while keeping his lightsaber away from the Cortosis helmet, because that would short the blade. Then Qimir hurls both lightsabers at Sol, a double force throw, which is crazy because he has to concentrate on keeping both sabers ignited. Sol bats both of these away, and while Qimir summons them back as boomerangs, he holsters his saber, and you just gotta watch this. Awesome! It looks like he does a Force Repulse move from the Force Unleashed game. Osha and Mae confront each other in their burnt childhood bedroom. Mae tells her that Sol killed their mother, and Osha attacks, sliding low through the ash. Osha is far more rage-filled and the aggressor of these two. Now, this combat was not all Amanda Stenberg. She does a lot of it, but really she was playing against her acting double, Anise Archer, and then two stunt doubles, Cassie Jo Craig and Kalina Rutherford. You can actually see either Cassie or Kalina on one of these spin kicks here, but there were other shots where the VFX team actually took the step to paint in Amanda's face for these few frames where both faces would be in the shot. And I love how, as the fight goes on, both sisters are just increasingly doing the same moves in the same blocks, mirrored, because they are the same person approaching this fight the same way as they get increasingly desperate. Then we get this amazing match cut of Osha and Mae's kicks crossing to Qimir and Sol's sabers crossing in the exact part of the frame. But the cut happens a split second before the legs hit each other, so that on the other side of the edit, we get to see the moment the sabers clash. clash. So the edit doesn't happen on the clash, it happens right before the clash, so we get the full impact of the movement. Both pairs notice Vernestra's ship arriving, and Osha is again faked out as Mae seems to teleport away like Qimir did. I mean, does Mae also have the ability to apparate via smoke? It seemed like when that was starting to happen to her body as a young girl last episode, it was really her mother starting to do that with her. Like, is everyone Batman?
He does that.
Qimir lunges his saber at Soul's head and then pulls it back to pull in Soul's saber toward his Cortosis helmet. I love the scream of the sabers singeing each other, and the fact that Qimir wants to bring in Soul's saber to the Cortosis to short it out, and those sparks just slapping against the Cortosis and fizzing out. But I have to ask, couldn't Qimir at this point just like slightly turn his wrist towards Soul and decapitate him? You know, just one of these like that. Just that. Even when someone's holding our arm, our wrist can still do this. I don't know, I guess that hold that Soul had on his saber arm right below the wrist is just that strong. Like maybe he's got a good thumb there and he's like, I can't move my wrist, dang it. But the duel ends with both of them lunging at each other and then freezing on the other side. Kymir's hilt is severed, but the blocking is just like Obi-Wan's final duel with Maul on Rebels, which itself was inspired by duels from Akira Kurosawa films like The Seven Samurai. Kymir's red saber crystal is left exposed, as if giving us some inspiration, and Soul has his blue saber at his throat, but Mae leaps in to wrestle it away, and we do not see where Mae enters the shot. The camera just kind of turns in a way that makes it look like she teleports from out of nowhere. For the first time, Mae separates a Jedi from their lightsaber. This is something she's been trying to do all season long and failed, but now she finally succeeds. But Mae, in this moment of success, tosses the saber and cracks the hilt to expose the blue Kyber crystal inside. In this close-up, we see that crystal right beneath the emitter tip. Mae refuses to strike down Soul, but instead wants him to confess his crimes before the High Council, the Senate, the Republic. But Soul still says he did the right thing and goes on to explain how she and her sister are freaks.
You and Osha are the same person. I don't know how your mother did it. She created life. I believe she used the Force to create you and Osha.
Now notice that Qimir doesn't say anything here, but his reaction suggests that he may at least be familiar with this concept. It's possible that he's aware of Plagueis' experiments with these witches to use virginses and midichlorian manipulation to create life, or at least he's taking in the impact of what these two are, and that could explain why they are as powerful as they are. Soul finally admits to killing Anastasia, and Osha overhears, holding Soul's saber. Soul goes on, saying he lied to protect Osha, and that he did this so that the Jedi would train her.
I did everything because I love.
She catches his word in a Force choke, and that word was going to be because I love you. She doesn't let him get out the word love. Now, in a Zoom call with press last week, Leslie Headland said that the finale would be about the sins of the father, the way Return of the Jedi was. We've often been hearing the Kylo Ren theme music on the show, and I wonder if this was really a reference to Kylo Ren killing his father Han Solo, the way Osha has to kill her father figure on this show. As Osha chokes Soul, she bleeds his blue Kyber crystal red. So bleeding a Kyber crystal like this is how the Sith get their red sabers. They pour all their rage and hatred into the crystal. This was first established in canon in E.K. Johnston's 2016 Ahsoka novel, where Ahsoka was able to purify the red crystal in the Inquisitor she defeated to get her white blades. We saw it in comics like Darth Vader #5, and Marvel's The Rise of Kylo Ren comic, and in the Jedi Survivor game, but this is the first time we've seen a close-up of a crystal changing its color in live action. Think about it, this is a crystal Soul would have gotten from Ilum as a boy, and it bleeds as oxygen is denied to his brain. In Soul's final words, he forgives Osha for this and he says it's okay. And then he drops dead. It is disturbing, but we are not watching a hero's journey here. This is a tragedy. It's a cautionary tale for what we do to our hearts when we refuse to forgive. Osha has now done what Mae never could. She killed a Jedi without a weapon, and in doing so completed Kymir's final lesson. But she turns the saber on Qimir, and now she sees the process complete in an external form, the red aggressively shoving out the blue with an extra sizzle of smoke working its way up the blade with the color change, like the blue is being burned out of the blade by the red. As Osha looks at her sister, the red blade now reflects in her eyes, so we've come full circle with those reflections that we saw in the opening moments when the Cortosis helmet was lifted. Osha is realizing that she has now spared her sister from the dark side. Mae leads Osha through the tunnel she used to escape when she fell on the night of the fire. This tunnel is similar to the one in Cloud City that sucked Luke out during his fall after fighting with Vader in Empire Strikes Back. But the moment Vernestra sets foot on Brendok, she senses Qimir.
You
It reminds us of Vader sensing Obi-Wan's presence on the Death Star.
I sense something. A presence I've not felt since...
Vernestra uses psychometry to hear the voices from the conflict that night. Qimir, with his helmet blocking Vernestra's senses, watches as she kneels down to tell Sol something which we learn later is this.
Sorry, my friend.
And she later tells Mae,
I need you to help me find someone.
Who?
A pupil of mine, before he turned to evil.
a pupil of mine before he turned to evil. This is exactly how Obi-Wan described Vader to Luke.
A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil.
But I think the implication is that Qimir was totally Vernestra's student. Those burn scars on his back were likely created by her light whip. She tortured him! But in the High Republic novels, Vernestra at age 15 becomes one of the youngest Jedi of her era to take on a Padawan, and that Padawan was named Imri Kantaros. There have been various Qimir equals Imri theories out there. I did not think they were true, but now I'm wondering, because I will say the Star Wars website was sure to mention Imri on Vernestra's character page, and she named her ship the Kantaros after him. So really, her moment sensing her former pupil on Brendok might not just be her stepping onto the terrain of Brendok, but also her stepping off of the ship that she named after him. Mae and Osha make it back to the Bunta tree, and they apologize to each other, and Osha says,
"You are with me. I am with you." Who taught us that rhyme? I thought you made it up.
I think this rhyme came from Mother Coral. We still have some questions about Mother Coral because we never saw her body with the other dead witches, and Leslie Headland indicated the fact that Coral is an Iridonian Zabrak could have some clue pointing to her secrets and that we may see her in season 2. I think Coral was this coven's link to the main sect of Night Sisters from Dathomir, and before that from Peridia, as we saw in the Ahsoka show, and that those witches might worship the fourth deity of Mortis, the Mother, aka Abeloth, a goddess rumored to be part of Ahsoka season 2. Osha offers to train with Qimir if he lets her sister go, and Qimir offers to wipe Mae's memory to remove Osha and Qimir from her mind. This was inspired by the mind wipe done on Revan by the Jedi in Knights of the Old Republic.
Please don't do the memory wipe thing or whatever it is you guys do.
Mae and Osha promise to find each other, and they go back into their rhyme.
You are with me. I am with you. Always one. Born as two.
And she gives a nod to Qimir that she's ready for him to go through with it.
And below lies the... I give you you. And you give. You give.
Ah, the saddest part. Mae is left not knowing what Osha gave her, and it's because the answer to that question is me. And now that her memory has been altered, her sense of identity is lost. But as we've seen in our world of people suffering with dementia, sometimes music or poetry can unlock memories. And maybe if she can hold on to this rhyme somewhere in her mind, just the words of it, that could be enough to bring her sister back to her someday. But Mae, for now, is arrested and taken before Vernestra in Vernestra's innocent white tribunal gown. Vern asks what she remembers, and Mae just remembers a fire, a man who killed their mother, and running away.
Your last memory is from when you were 8 years old.
Yikes! I just thought Qimir was extracting only himself and Osha from her memory, but it sounds like he did a blanket wipe of all of her memories for the past 16 years so that she remembers no life experiences from anything after being 8 years old. That's rough. Vernestra reports to the Senate Tribunal that the 4 Jedi encountered a Force cult of witches and that a conflict ensued, but she mentions nothing about the Virgins, nothing about Osha or Mae or the Sith, and she blames the recent murders on the rogue Jedi Sol killing his accomplices to keep it all a secret. She's speaking before Chancellor Drellick, who is a Tarsant race, and Vernestra says that Sol ended his own life, but we see how she burned his body on a raft, which is a traditional Jedi burial, not necessarily on a raft, but just a funeral pyre. And she tells Mae,
Sol made a mistake he lived with for so long it twisted his mind. He justified every selfish step with the love he had for your sister.
I think Vern is really talking about herself here. She made the mistake that she had to live with for so long that it twisted her mind, justifying every selfish step with love. Her mistake, I think, was Qimir, and maybe what influenced her mistake were whispers from hyperspace from Plagueis. I mean, that would be excusing her for whipping a child, but do you want to remember this beloved character from the High Republic novels as a monster? Qimir joins Osha's side and holds her hand on that new bloody Kyber crystal lightsaber. Could we be seeing a new Splinter Order of Sith who aren't afraid to embrace their emotions? A true Sith power couple? We end on these amazing violin strings. We see the two of them framed together against the violent waves, a Sith rule of two, but from the perspective of Plagueis, who would surely be watching this from the cave behind them. We end with this tag that I think was probably going to be a post-credit scene.
Sorry to disturb you, Master. We need to talk.
Yoda's ears perk up. He's definitely a practical puppet in this shot. So this would not be CGI version of Yoda that we saw in Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith or in Phantom Menace after George Lucas remastered it from the original Frank Oz puppet version of the character, where it did look a little weird, but you know, they were trying to de-age the puppet to an earlier era. So I think if we see Yoda again, he's going to be a practical puppet, and I'm very excited to see what he looks like. I just love that Star Wars can clue us into the species merely with the silhouette of these ears. This framing was just how Grogu was introduced in The Mandalorian. So ultimately, how much will Yoda learn about this scandal? I don't think we want Yoda to join Vernestra in her corrupt cover-up of these crimes and her burial of the truth, or to turn Yoda into a scheming crook hiding from righteous political forces. While it was Ki-Adi-Mundi in The Phantom Menace who said that the Sith had been extinct for a millennium, Yoda always knew about the Sith rule of two. He did bring it up to Mace Windu at Qui-Gon's funeral. So maybe he'll just think of this moment as the time the Sith slipped through their fingers and that they were always out there. If this show comes back for a second season, Yoda is gonna have to assume at some point that both Plagueis and whoever the Jedi think will become Plagueis' final apprentice, whether it's Qimir or Osha, were both destroyed and the line ended there, because that's the only way they're going to be caught off guard by the time of the Phantom Menace. Also, they're going to have to keep this from Ki-Adi-Mundi for him to say that boneheaded thing on the High Council in Phantom Menace. I went further into my final thoughts and my review of the series in our Ending Explained video. Go check that out. But here I want to thank you all for joining us for these breakdowns of The Acolyte. I have loved so much about this show, and on an internet plagued by performative hot takes to weaponize Star Wars against each other, I'm just glad that we here could come together every week and just appreciate the artistry, the attention to detail, and just have some fun with theories. Comment down below with what you loved about these past 2 months talking about The Acolyte. Follow me at EA Voss. Subscribe to all 3 channels on the new Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.